Good morning, Baltimore, and good morning to everyone tuning in to WBCM Channel 100 News. I'm Mark.
And I'm Peace, and we've got a big story for you today, folks. It involves bridges, concrete, a little bit of mystery, and a lot of science.
That's right, Peace. Our Science 100 investigative team has been out in the field, boots in the mud, test tubes in hand, looking into one big question.
Does human-made infrastructure affect our local water?
Stay with us to find out the results.
So Mark, before we go to our reporters out in the field, let's set the scene. Why are we even talking about water quality and infrastructure today?
Great question, Peace. Here's the deal. Every time it rains, water doesn't just disappear. It hits roads, parking lots, sidewalks, bridges, all those hard surfaces we call impervious surfaces, and it has to go somewhere.
And where it goes is our streams and rivers.
Exactly. According to research from Penn State, when rainwater can't soak into the ground, it picks up everything in its path. Sediment, oil, fertilizer, salt, you name it. And it dumps it straight into our local waterways.
Yikes. And it gets worse, right? Because the infrastructure itself is also breaking down over time.
That's right. There's a 2017 study by Kashal and colleagues that introduced this idea of human-accelerated weathering. Basically, concrete and asphalt slowly dissolve and leach calcium, magnesium, and salt into our water. It's not just runoff. It's the structures themselves.
And just last summer, the Baltimore Sun reported a 21 million gallon overflow at the Patapsco wastewater treatment plant. 21 million gallons of untreated wastewater right into the river.
Which is exactly why our team picked this topic. We wanted to know, locally, right here in our backyard, is this actually showing up in our water?
So they ran the experiment. 2 locations, 4 parameters, and 1 big question.
And to walk us through what they found, we're joined in the studio by lead scientist on the project.
Joining us in the studio is Glory, lead scientist on the Science 100 Water Quality Investigation. Glory, thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me, Peace. I'm happy to be here.
So, Glory, walk us through it. What was the team actually trying to find out?
The Patapsco River and Bascom Creek. Both are local freshwater bodies. When I refer to my notes, we find out that they have different infrastructure profiles. The Patapsco site had an active construction site, a bridge, roads, buildings, and a trail nearby. Bascom Creek, on the other hand, had houses, a railroad, and a bridge directly above where we collected water samples.
And what did you actually test for?
4 parameters. Water hardness, that tells us about dissolved minerals like calcium and magnesium. Ammonia and nitrogen, that's a marker for pollution and runoff. pH, that's how acidic or alkaline the water is. And turbidity, that's basically how cloudy or clear the water is.
Okay. Why these 4 parameters?
Each one tells us something very different. Hardness can show us if concrete and asphalt are weathering into the water. We don't want to drink concrete. Ammonia and nitrogen can point us to wastewater or fertilizer runoff. pH affects whether aquatic life can survive. Fish are really sensitive to that. And turbidity tells us about sediments, which can block sunlight from underwater plants and clog fish gills.
That's a lot to manage. How did the team keep things consistent between the 2 sides?
Good question. We controlled what we could. Same time of day, same surface depth, identical clean collection bottles, and we ran every test the same way, using the same lab kit, and as soon as we got back to the classroom. When it comes to our independent and dependent variables, our independent variables were the locations themselves and the infrastructure around them. The dependent variables were the results we got back after we tested for the 4 parameters. Additionally, when it came to running our tests, we used a colorimeter to test ammonia, pH, and turbidity for Patapsco River and Bascom Creek, and a titration method for water hardness. For ammonia, we rinsed test tubes and filled them to 10 milliliters, scanned the blank, then added reagents, mixed, waited for color development, and scanned samples. For pH, we added a pH indicator to 10 milliliter samples, mixed, and scanned results after blanking the machine. For turbidity, we used distilled water as a blank, then scanned each sample after rinsing and wiping the tubes to remove fingerprints. For hardness, we added reagents to a measured sample, then tritated with hardness reagent number 7 until the color changed from red to blue, recording results from the tritator scale.
Smart. All right, before we dig into the results, let's actually go to the field. Our reporters were on site at both locations. Let's check in with Leslie at the Patapsco River.
right now I'm here at the Patapsco River site located in Ellicott City near the number 9 trail. And as you can see around me, it seems pretty busy, and I'm talking about the things around it. You can see that there's a bridge over there, and over here there's a lot of cars passing by, especially during this midday where there's a lot of people passing by trying to get back home from work. And you can see that there's actually a construction site over there. And if you were to follow the river more down this way, you would see that there's actually another construction site. And also passing by, there is some residential areas all the way up, leading more towards this side, but it's really far. And as you can see, there's actually a lot of dead tree branches right here. And if you were to take a closer look into the water, you could see that there's actually not that much debris, but we can see that there's some dead leaves, and also the color of the soil is like a reddish color, and I don't know if you guys can tell, but the color of the rocks as well. And we can also see that there's some creatures on here just like skipping into the water. It is like this mossy texture on the rocks in the water. And before we went live, we actually saw some geese in the water. They're long gone right now, but they're probably gonna come back. And I did see them resting here as well. And we can see some birds, some light activity over here. And we are gonna be using this water bottle to collect our water sample. We collected our water sample mid-morning, and we used a clean plastic water bottle to collect our water. So we're just gonna collect the water. See over here, there's actually some insects in the water as well. And there as well, just skipping around in the water. And as you can see, the water clarity is pretty clear. It's not that cloudy. I don't see any turbidity, it looks pretty clear to me. But I will say, when we did collect our water sample, it had not rained in a couple days, and today as we're live here, it did rain for the last 2 days, so there's probably some difference. Just because the water is clear does not mean that the water quality tests are going to come out clear, perfect, and show that there isn't any residue from these construction sites or bridges. So we will be seeing that in our lab results. And I do want to say that what's important to understand about the Patapsco River site is that it's not just dealing what's around it. The river is also downstream of a water waste treatment plant that is massive. Around 21 gallons of this water comes down into the stream, and when it flows down into here, it enters with pollutants like fertilizer, oil, sediment, untreated wastewater that flow right past here into this Patapsco River where we collected our water sample. I do also want to mention that this is worst case scenario, because all of this is just like all in one place, concentrated into one place. Construction, bridges, roads, wastewater issues, all of it. Reporting from Patapsco River, back to you, Mark and Peace.
Thanks, Leslie. Great reporting. Now, let's check in with Sei over at Bascom Creek for a different perspective.
To you live from Bascom Creek, where the vibe here is honestly very different than what Leslie described at the Patapsco Creek. This site is a lot more residential. We've got houses nearby, a bridge above the creek, and a railroad to the left. Also a lot of neighborhoods and roads and other infrastructure surrounding the creek, but it's somewhat enclosed by trees and plants, so it's a lot more sheltered than the Patapsco site. The water itself looks quite dark, but once we collected the water sample, it was surprisingly very clear and not a lot of visible debris. But what's very interesting about this site at a science standpoint is how Bascom Creek doesn't have active construction like the Patapsco site does. But there's decades of older infrastructure from the bridges, railroads, and residential development. So we wanted to see if the historical infrastructure showed up the same way that the active construction would. Going into this experiment, our team actually predicted the two sites to show differences in water, hardness, ammononitrogen, pH, and turbidity because of the different levels surrounding the development. This site actually has a bit of a twist between the data collection here, but I'll let our lead scientists break this down. Reporting live from Bascom Creek, back to you from the studio.
Thanks, Shay. Alright, Lori, moment of truth. Let's break down what the team actually found out.
All right, let's go parameter by parameter, starting with the headline result, water hardness. The Patapsco River clocked in at 120 parts per million. Bascom Creek came in at 80 parts per million. That's a 40-point gap, and the biggest difference we saw across all 4 tests.
And what does that gap actually mean?
It means the Patapsco had significantly more dissolved calcium and magnesium in it. And the most likely explanation is exactly what we hypothesized: human accelerated weathering. The concrete from the bridge, the asphalt from the roads, the materials at the construction site, all of that is slowly leaching minerals into the water. Kushal and colleagues documented this exact mechanism in their 2017 study.
Next up, turbidity.
Patapsco came in at 4 parts per million, Bascom Creek at 3 parts per million. Both are technically low, under 10, but Patapsco was visibly cloudier. That tracks with the active construction and the stormwater runoff carrying sediments into the river.
And ammonia nitrogen?
Patapsco was at 0.35 parts per million, Bascom at 0.3 parts per million. Again, Patapsco higher. Ammonia nitrogen points to pollution sources, fertilizer runoff, wastewater, organic decay. Given the Patapsco's proximity to the wastewater plant and active construction, that result makes sense.
And then pH. This one was the surprise, right?
Yes, this was the one that flipped on us. Patapsco had neutral pH of 7, but Bascom Creek, it came in at 8, more alkaline. That's actually closer to saltwater territory than freshwater.
Why would Bascom be more alkaline?
Our best explanation is road salt. Bascom is surrounded by residential roads, and over years of de-icing, all that sodium has likely seeped into the surrounding soil into the creek. That salt accumulation pushes the pH up. That's also documented in the Kushal 2017 study on salinization.
Now, Shay mentioned a hiccup with the data collection. Let's be transparent. What happened?
Yeah, we should definitely be upfront about this. During the water hardness tritation for Bascom Creek, the procedure says you should only insert the tritator once. Due to human error, ours was inserted 3 times before the color finally shifted from red to dark blue.
And what does that mean for the result?
It means our 80 parts per million reading for Bascom Creek is probably not as accurate as it should be. The improper addition of hardness region number 7 likely skewed that number. So we're being honest, that's known limitation.
Okay, I appreciate the honesty. So what's the verdict? Do you reject or accept your hypothesis?
We reject our hypothesis. The data clearly shows that Patapsco River had a pH of 7 and Bascom Creek had a pH of 8, which are normal for freshwater. Water hardness was 120 parts per million for the Patapsco River and 80 parts per million for Bascom Creek, both within the expected range but on the lower end. Turbidity levels were also normal, with 4 parts per million in the Patapsco River and 3 parts per million in Bascom Creek. Lastly, ammonia nitrate levels were 0.35 parts per million in the Patapsco River and 0.3 parts per million in Bascom Creek, which were higher than expected for freshwater. We originally expected lower pH and higher turbidity because both sites were near roads, bridges, trails, and other human-made infrastructure. That can increase runoff and affect water quality. However, rainfall had been limited before sampling, which likely reduced runoff entering the streams. This may explain why the pH and turbidity values were closer to normal levels than expected. For water hardness, we expected values between 80 and 180 parts per million because runoff from developed areas can carry minerals like calcium and magnesium into waterways. Our results fell within this range, suggesting some influence from surrounding infrastructure, although water hardness alone is not a strong indicator of human impact. Our ammonium nitrate results match our hypothesis, showing evidence that pollutants from roads, trails, and other surfaces may have entered into the streams through runoff. Since only some of our results support our hypothesis, we altogether rejected the hypothesis. However, the ammonium nitrate and harness results still suggest some effects from human infrastructure. Possible sources of error include, but definitely not limited to, storing samples in plastic water bottles, possible residue contamination, estimated measurements in some test tubes, and accidentally mixing pipettes between samples, which would have contaminated these samples. Human error, you know. In future experiments, using clean glass containers, clearly labeled pipettes, and more accurate measuring equipment would definitely improve reliability on this experimenting. Additionally, mentioned before, during the water hardness tractation for Bascom Creek, the procedure says you should only insert the tractator once. Due to human error, ours was inserted 3 times before the color finally shifted from red to dark blue, which could have skewed our results. Despite there not being enough evidence that points to infrastructure as a direct cause, the data revealed that this is definitely a factor that plays in negatively affecting the water quality of these rivers.
So, Glory, before we let you go, why should the average person watching this care?
Great question. Water quality isn't just an abstract topic. The pH affects whether fish can survive. High turbidity blocks sunlight from underwater plants and clogs fish gills. Excess ammonium nitrogen can be very toxic to many aquatic organisms and lead to a further decline in water quality by making it uninhabitable for aquatic life.
And these are local rivers. People kayak on the Patapsco, and kids like play near these creeks.
Exactly, and that same water system that feeds these rivers eventually connect to the Chesapeake Bay. So what happens upstream? At a construction site, at a waste plant, on a residential road? Has ripples effects that go way beyond the spot where it started.
Are there other things you wish you'd been able to test?
Well, yes. We talked about adding dissolved oxygen as a parameter. That would tell us about photosynthesis and whether the infrastructure is actually depriving the water of oxygen. Testing under different weather conditions would also be valuable. If we collected heavy rain, we'd probably see runoff effects amplified.
And if you were to do this again, what would be your next experiment?
Next experiment, we'd ask, does water quality improve as you move away from impervious surfaces? You could collect a sample at 50-meter intervals downstream from the Patapsco construction site and see if turbidity and hardness gradually drop off. That would give us a real clear signal about how far the impact actually extends.
Glory, thank you so much for breaking this down for us.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
When it rains in Baltimore, it doesn't just rain on the streets.
It rains on the rivers too.
Good night, Baltimore.